The station smelled of wet metal and rain, the kind of scent that lingers in your throat. It was crowded, a living tide of people dragging suitcases, hugging, crying, waving. The ceiling arched high above like the inside of a cathedral, and announcements echoed in a tinny voice, distorted but insistent, calling out departures and arrivals in a language that sounded colder than I remembered. I stood on the edge of the platform gripping my ticket so tightly it bent at the corners, the ink smudging against my palm. The paper was supposed to be my escape, but in that moment it felt like nothing more than proof of how foolish I'd been. I had arrived an hour early because I wanted to see him one last time. That was the truth I wouldn't even say out loud to myself. I had pretended I came early to avoid missing the train, but really I was hoping for a glimpse, for some kind of sign that I still mattered, that he would choose me the way he had promised in the quiet of our apartment, in the stolen hours between his other life and mine. In those moments his voice had been low and certain. Just one more trip, then it's only us. I swear, his eyes had darted away as he said it, but I had chosen to believe him anyway. I always did. The crowd shifted like a tide, and through a gap I saw him. My breath caught in my chest. Daniel was there, tall and elegant, wrapped in a charcoal coat I'd bought him last winter. He stood under the old iron clock, the same place where we used to meet. But he wasn't alone. Beside him was a woman I had never seen before. She was the kind of woman who seemed to have stepped out of a magazine. High heels even on the slick platform, a tailored red coat cinched at the waist, dark hair pinned up in a careless twist that looked effortless and expensive. She laughed at something he whispered, the sound like glass beads falling on stone. He reached out and adjusted her scarf with a tenderness that punched the air from my lungs. His fingers brushed her cheek the way they used to brush mine, as if he were memorizing the texture of her skin. She leaned into his touch, and in that small movement the truth became undeniable. It wasn't business he'd been traveling for. It wasn't work that kept him from my calls. It was her. It had been her all along. A departure announcement blared overhead, but the words didn't register. My ears were full of a high, rushing sound, like waves collapsing on rocks. I wanted to walk over, to confront him, to throw every promise back in his face. But my legs were heavy and unresponsive, rooted to the platform as if the concrete itself had claimed me. All I could do was watch, a stranger looking at strangers. Daniel glanced around once, a quick sweep of the crowd, and for a split second his eyes passed over me. He didn't see me, or maybe he did and chose not to. Either way, it felt like a blade sliding between my ribs. He had always assumed I'd wait. That was our pattern. He drifted away, and I stayed. He lied, and I forgave. He left, and I was still there when he returned. He thought my loyalty was endless, a natural resource he could draw from until it ran dry. Something inside me shifted, a quiet click like a lock turning. I realized that if I stood there another moment, I would be watching him board a train with her, and then the image would be burned into me forever. I couldn't bear it. I turned away, pushing through the crowd. My hands trembled as I clutched my ticket, the one I had bought weeks ago as a contingency, a whispered possibility. It wasn't to the same destination as his. It was anywhere but here. As I moved toward the far platform, memories clawed at me. The first time he took me to dinner, the way he laughed in his sleep, the night he whispered he'd build a life with me if I could only be patient. All those soft moments now felt like decoys leading me to this point. The station's exit sign glowed ahead like a dare. People jostled past me, dragging their lives behind them in rolling cases. I kept my head down, my hair falling forward like a curtain, as though invisibility could be a kind of freedom. My train was already boarding, the door open like a mouth. Without allowing myself to look back, I stepped inside. The warmth of the carriage wrapped around me, smelling faintly of coffee and engine oil. I slid into a window seat, my heart hammering against my ribs. Outside, the platform blurred with movement. Through the rain-smeared glass, I could just make out Daniel's shape at a distance, his coat dark against the pale stone. He was bending to lift her suitcase. I couldn't see his face. I didn't want to. A whistle blew, sharp and final. The train lurched forward with a metallic groan. My stomach flipped as the platform began to slide past, the figures shrinking, dissolving into streaks of gray and red. I pressed my forehead to the glass, my breath fogging a small circle. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for him. I wasn't the one left behind. I was leaving. As the station receded, I let the ticket fall from my fingers onto the table between the seats. I realized my hands were steady now. The landscape outside blurred into fields and rain, and a strange calm spread through me. It wasn't joy exactly, but it was something cleaner than grief. It was the beginning of absence, the first breath after breaking the surface. I didn't know where the train would carry me. I only knew it would be away from Daniel, away from the version of myself who kept hoping he'd change. He thought I'd stay, but I had left forever. The sound of the rails built a rhythm beneath me like a heartbeat, and I leaned back, closing my eyes, letting the motion take me somewhere new. The train took me farther than I expected. At every junction I changed lines, buying new tickets with cash, crisscrossing the map until the names of the stations no longer meant anything to me. It was like shedding a skin. By the time I finally stepped off for good, I was in a small coastal town that smelled of salt and pine. The sea was always somewhere in the background, its restless noise filling the spaces between conversations. Houses here were painted in peeling colors, windows hung with lace curtains, gardens overgrown with rosemary. Nobody knew me, and nobody cared. That anonymity was a kind of mercy. I found a room above a bakery run by an elderly couple who barely spoke to me beyond a nod in the mornings. The scent of fresh bread drifted up through the floorboards before dawn. I took long walks on the cliffs at night, the wind whipping my hair into knots, the spray of the ocean cooling my cheeks. With each step, I tried to believe that the life I had left was nothing but a story, a bad dream that dissolved with daylight. I dyed my hair a darker shade, traded my city clothes for plain sweaters and boots, and stopped checking my phone. For the first few weeks, the silence felt like a bomb. No messages from Daniel, no whispered promises, no lies. Just the endless sky and the hush of the tide pulling away from the shore. But freedom has its own weight. It presses down on you when you least expect it. At night, lying awake in the narrow bed, I sometimes felt his presence like a draft under the door. The shadows of the room shifted and stretched, becoming the shape of his shoulders, the curve of his mouth. I kept expecting the sound of a car pulling up outside, a knock at the door, a familiar voice calling my name. Even the smallest things, an accent at the market, the smell of his cologne on a stranger, could stop me cold. Daniel had been a part of me for so long that cutting him out left a wound that hadn't yet closed. One rainy evening, the storm came in hard from the sea, slamming against the windows like fists. I lit a single candle and tried to read, but my eyes wouldn't focus. When the knock finally came at the door, it startled me so badly I almost dropped the book. Heart hammering, I crossed the small room. Nobody stood outside when I opened it, just darkness, wet air, and the sound of rain. But on the floor lay a plain envelope, soaked at the edges. My name wasn't on it. No handwriting, just the envelope itself, sealed. Inside was a single photograph. It was the train station. I recognized the old iron clock, the gray stone walls, the slick tracks shining from rain. And there, at the center, was Daniel. Alone this time, standing exactly where I had seen him with her. His coat hung looser on him now, his hair messier, his face drawn. He looked like a man who hadn't slept. On the back of the photograph, in his handwriting, were 4 words, "I was wrong. Please come back." No return address. No phone number. Nothing else. I sat on the bed staring at it for a long time, the candlelight flickering across the image. My first reaction was a spike of anger. He had chosen her, and now that it had gone wrong he wanted me back. He thought I was still there to catch him when he fell. I should have torn the photo into pieces, thrown it into the storm outside. But my hands wouldn't obey. Instead, I found myself tracing the edge of his face with my thumb, remembering the way he used to look at me, the way his hand used to find mine in a crowd. And then I noticed something. In the background of the photo, just at the edge of the frame, a figure was watching him. Blurred by distance and rain, but unmistakable. Not a commuter, not a passerby. The figure stood still, half hidden by a column, head tilted as if waiting. The longer I looked, the more a cold unease spread through me. That shadow wasn't mine. Someone else was circling him now. I told myself it was nothing. A trick of the light, a stranger caught in the moment the shutter clicked. But deep down I knew better. Daniel had money, yes. Connections, enemies too. He played games with powerful people. I had always known that but chosen to ignore it. Maybe the woman I saw him with hadn't been a lover at all. Maybe she had been something else. Dangerous in ways I couldn't guess. I shoved the photograph into the drawer and tried to forget it. Days passed. The storm broke. The bakery downstairs filled with the smell of sweet bread again. I walked the cliffs. I told myself I was free. But the image of the figure in the photo wouldn't leave me. Each night it returned sharper, more real, like a stain bleeding through fabric. My dreams became crowded with trains, with red coats, with whispers I couldn't quite make out. Then, a second envelope arrived. This time I didn't hear a knock. It was just there on my table one afternoon when I came back from a walk, as though it had appeared out of the sea wind itself. Inside was a train ticket, same station, same day of the week, 1 year after I had left. No note, no explanation, just the ticket. My hands shook as I held it. The ink was crisp, new. My name wasn't printed anywhere, but somehow I knew it was for me. I thought of burning it, tearing it, throwing it into the waves. But I didn't. I slipped it into the pocket of my coat instead, where it sat like a stone against my ribs. For the rest of the day I went through the motions, helping the baker carry in sacks of flour, wiping crumbs from the counter, pretending I wasn't already thinking of train schedules and departure times. That night, lying awake, I stared at the ceiling and tried to understand what I was feeling. Fear, yes, curiosity, and something else, an old pull, like the tug of a current under the surface. I told myself I wouldn't go. That I was done with him. That whatever trap or plea he was weaving, it wasn't my concern. But my dreams kept shifting, showing me the station, showing me his face, gaunt and desperate, showing me the blurred shadow behind him growing clearer, closer. By dawn I was sitting up, fully dressed, the ticket in my hand. My heart beat a steady rhythm in my throat. I realized, with a mixture of dread and certainty, that leaving hadn't been the end of the story. It had only been the beginning of something